Your Steve Jones Show podcast will start shortly. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Brewers Outlet, your beverage supermarket on Reagan Street in Sunbury. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is the Steve Jones Show on a Brewers Outlet Friday. News Radio 1070 WKOK. Today's show, as always, brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. All the greatest domestic brews. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. That pickle bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. Water, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day as well. And 6 different flavors of slushies, too. And you know what? It's been still feeling like summer, so you can still get some of those slushies right now. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. And Steve is in the literally mobile Sunbury Motors studio. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. And that is because Steve is going to be literally en route to Bloomington when we talk to him today. He was supposed to be scheduled to land in Indianapolis, where he is staying for the game, and then driving to the game in Bloomington for tomorrow. But unfortunately, sometimes when you travel by air, things come up. So we had a little bit of a fog issue for a portion of Steve's trip through the air, so he had to make a couple of adjustments. And he is now going to be en route driving as we speak. He actually had to fly to Chicago and now is going to drive from Chicago to Indy. So that's where we'll see him en route. He will join us live in the 4 o'clock hour. But just to give him a little bit more time to get his bearings together and get on the road safely, we have the first hour here of kind of replaying some of our interviews from this week, including Phil Trautwein, Penn State's offensive line coach. We heard from him earlier this week with Steve, and so we'll play that in just a second. Then at 3:35 today, Steve, before he left, had a chance to talk to Ben Jones, StateCollege.com, with more on the shocking news of Patrick Chambers resigning as Penn State men's basketball coach. So that's coming up at 3:35. Then when Steve joins us live at 4:06, we'll have Penn State reporter Rich Scarcella from the Reading Eagle for his take on the Indiana game. And then at 4:35, it's our pick segment with the King. So we'll have it all together, normal for the 4 o'clock hour, but we're just going to give Steve a little more time to get his bearings about him. I think he has just about landed in Chicago and should be starting to drive in his journey to Indianapolis. So that's kind of the story for today. Going to be a little bit unusual, but it's 2020. What's not been unusual so far this year? So as I mentioned before, Steve had a chance to talk with Penn State offensive line coach Phil Trautwein, get a feel for one of the better positions of depth for this team, and it's certainly going to be very critical now as Penn State goes into the 2020 season without one of its top playmakers, Journey Brown, though, of course, running back looks pretty good, too, as far as depth is concerned. But we focus on the offensive line with Phil Trautwein, and Steve talked to him earlier this week about the group and about the upcoming season.
State offensive line. This now being game week as Penn State plays Indiana Saturday at Memorial Stadium in Bloomington, 3:30. The kickoff where I'm beginning at 2 o'clock. When I look at the Penn State offensive line, I feel like this is the best offensive line I've seen at Penn State since 2008. Now, we'll have to see how it plays out, whether that's reality or not. But the guy in charge of that offensive line is Phil Trautwein. I had an opportunity to talk with him.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm excited. I'm excited to be a part of Penn State and what Penn State's all about, and I'm excited.
All right, so let's get to this. We're in an interesting part right now. It's that part where you go through training camp, and then you make the transition to game week. How important is it for an offensive lineman that in this transition that you make sure that there's a fine line between the work you need but also the legs needed to play the game?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty smart. Coach Franklin does a great job of, making sure our guys are fresh for the game, but, with the number of reps and how many live reps, how many, scout team reps, so we make sure that, we handle it right because, like you said, you need to make sure your guys are fresh for the game. and fresh for Saturday. So just trying to handle that and making sure that they're also getting great work and getting ready for the game is crucial to having success on Saturday.
When Coach Franklin was on the show with me a couple of weeks ago, he was kidding around. He said everyone glosses over where we were on the offensive line. He said, but you and I remember what it was like when he first got here. So let's take somebody who's now approaching this from the outside that's now inside. That's you. What did you think, and what do you now think of Penn State's offensive line depth as you've had a chance to see them in practice?
Yeah, we have a lot of talent. We have the depth. I think, we have 9 to 10 guys that can go in and play, and that's something that I know Coach Franklin has been working hard with. The last, since he's been here. And you could definitely see it. You could definitely see the hard work in recruiting and what they've done. And you also got players that love football and that want to be great, so that makes it easier. But, the depth is something that, it's different for me, for sure.
All right. You went out right away, and you forged a relationship with Michael Menet. The last time I was around anything was a workout back in March towards of physically being there. I could see you and Menet were talking a lot even during that workout. What did it mean to you to forge a bond with him, and what did it mean to the room that you did that? From day one, I looked at Menet as definitely one of the leaders in the O-line room, and I knew that getting to him and getting him to believe in, what I'm about and who I am and get to know me, I think was key because, if he goes, hey, guys, this is the guy you guys want to listen to, then everyone else will listen. And so, I built relationships with all of them, but I knew at least to get to Menet first and at least get the guy that's the leader of the room and talk with him. And then from there, I slowly, with the upperclassmen and then just trickle down. And now I feel like, I have great relationships with every guy on the offensive line, and they're awesome. And every day I go out there and try to make them all better, and I think they see that and they feel that, and that's what to be a great offensive line coach you have to do. You have to get your guys to believe in what you're about and what you believe in. Everyone has aspirations. You were able through hard work to achieve goals that maybe some people, somehow he becomes a starter and somehow he gets to the NFL. Have the players asked you about your story? Because you're not usually one that volunteers stuff like that, but have they asked you about your story, and what do you think it means to a player that the example of your story can mean to them?
They ask me sometimes, Coach, tell us about, what you had to go through, or, how did you, kid from New Jersey go to Florida and able to, play there. And I kind of use because all I really know is myself and what I've been through. So I use myself, what I have done, and I've been through what a lot of these guys have been through or they're going to go through. So I kind of use it as, my bumps and bruises and what I've learned along the way and the lessons I've learned, I give to them. And, success as well. I show them, how I was successful, how I, this week is big, going into game week of how I prepared against my opponent and how I'm going to prepare them to play their best game, how I'm going to build confidence in them. And, as, a guy that wasn't very talented as an offensive lineman and able to play, 5 years in the NFL, I kind of use that as, example and show them, if you have the right mindset and you decide that you want to be great, you can be successful and you can maximize your potential. So just getting them to kind of see that, and I use myself a lot because that's what I know.
Over time, we've been able to see guys that can play multiple spots. Michael Miranda can play center or he can play guard. Des Holmes can play tackle or he can play guard. And there's been a little bit with Will Fries playing a little bit of guard while also playing tackle. So when you look at somebody, what is a determining factor for you, Phil, that you'd like to see somebody just try another position in case down the road it is needed? What attributes do they have to have, in your opinion?
Number one thing, they have to be smart. They have to be able to, juggle it and learn it. be able to take limited reps there and be able to go and perform at a high level. I also know who can mentally do it, but also who can, without those reps, can physically do it. Like, can they only take 2 reps at right guard, but if I have to throw him in the game, I know that he'll at least be able to do it. He'll be able to, come off the ball and be able to do his job. So, I look at that first, and then, I think that, if you have athletic guys that can move their feet, that are powerful, you can play them anywhere on the offensive line. I'm not too big about, they have to be 6'7" to play tackle, or they have to be 6'3" to play guard. Like, I'll put a guy that's 6'5", 6'6" at guard if I feel like he can, he has the power and he has the footwork, and, he can also go out to tackle, or he can also play center if I need him to play center. But also getting them ready for that, because I feel like the more you can do that, that's the best way for you to get the best 5 on the field. And, that's what I'm always trying to accomplish as an offensive line coach. How can I get the best 5? And so that's what I'm always trying to look at. And sometimes I put a guy right guard, and I'm like, nope, he can't do it. But you learn, and that's what training camp's great, and that's what spring ball's all about, and at least getting those reps and getting them feel comfortable.
Phil, I talked about the bonding with Michael Bennett. Now I'd like to ask you about Michael Bennett, the football player. What makes him a really good college center that a guy like Phil Trautwein can count on?
He's smart, and he loves football. And those 2 things can get you, in my mind, can get you far in the game. If he's willing, like he'll text me, Coach, this cut up, or he'll send me a video of a play from Indiana or whoever we're playing against, or a practice, and say, what I do wrong here? What do I need to do better here? Or what look is this? Or who would I point in this? So he loves football. He's always trying to get better. He's always trying to make sure that he's going to put himself in the best situation out on the field, technique-wise, and then, of course, assignment sound. And if you have that, you're gonna be a heck of a football player in college, and then also those habits build you for the NFL as well. And I don't know if you watch a lot of NFL football, but there's some very average talent offensive linemen out there, but that are really smart, and they understand the game of football, and they just do their job. And that's what you want, and that's what Bennett does.
All right, another veteran and a guy who's in grad school now is Will Fries. He's in that right tackle spot for you, and James had mentioned he's dabbled some at that guard spot as well. But what do you see in Will Fries?
Will also, he loves the game of football. He tries to be a technician. He wants to go out there every day and work on something, make sure that he gets better at something, in his toolbox every day, which is great. And he's slowly just getting better and better and better. I mean, he's still getting better, which a guy, usually going into his 5th year, sometimes that doesn't happen, but it is happening. He's getting better every day, and it's great to see and how he works and what he does every day. All the work that he puts in, it's starting to show.
Let's flip it over to the other side. A youngster who impressed a lot of people last year, Rasheed Walker. What do you see in him, Phil, especially on that left side?
Yeah, Rasheed is he's athletic. He's a guy that loves to be coached. He wants to come out every day and work on something. He's a competitor, and I love to see that. When you have a guy that just goes out and tries to work on his craft and wants to be great and has tools and athleticism, it's fun to coach a guy like that. And he's that guy, and he's learning the game of football, and he's he's taken my coaching, and I see him having a really big year this year.
C.J. Thorpe is somebody that I think it's safe to say can bring an attitude to anything he does, an attitude to that offensive line. When you look at him, what does, quote, that attitude mean to go with talent? Yeah,
he's a finisher. You ask all the offensive line coaches, in the country, and you ask what they want. They want a guy that's tough, a guy that wants to finish every play. And, that's what CJ brings to, our unit. He's out there. He loves the game of football, and he's going out there and he's trying to pose his will on anybody that wants to go against him. And, it kind of sets the tone for the whole offensive line. So it's great to have. And a lot of guys are like that in this room, and it's great to see.
And one of those guys probably is Mike Miranda. As I mentioned earlier, he can play center, he can play guard. So what do you like about him when he's at the guard spot?
I just like he's a technician. He knows exactly what to do. He communicates. He helps kind of balance the offensive line because he also can play center, and he can play both guard positions. So he's a guy that is versatile, and he's the guy that we definitely we need, and it's awesome to be able to coach him. He takes coaching very well, and he loves the game. He loves getting coached.
Juice Scruggs can do exactly what you just talked about with Mike Miranda. He can play center, he can play guard. He's had to overcome a lot to get here, Phil. And obviously what he had to overcome was before you got here. What have you seen in his development? Because I'm sure with him, he's got to stretch out a little bit more before practice begins because life's a little bit different for him now. But what have you seen in him?
He's a hard worker. He's taken this opportunity. He's a guy that, he got a second chance. He got, who knew if he was going to come back, and he came back, and he's better, and he loves it. He comes out every day and, takes coaching, and he's also physical. He loves to put his hands on people. He loves to drive to the whistle. He's a finisher as well, and he's a guy that can play, center and both guards, and he can go out there and perform at a very high level.
Caden Wallace is a guy that was very tempting last year for the coaching staff because he had a lot of talent. He was on the field goal unit initially, and then when he got to the 4-game limit, they decided they would redshirt him. So in his development, what makes him a promising prospect to Phil Trautwein's eye?
Great talent. And he honestly, he takes coaching. You can coach him hard. You can tell him, exactly what he needs to do to get better, and he'll listen, and he'll go out there and do everything he can to, do it. And he's learning the game. He's learning how to be a technician. He's starting to understand that his talent, got him here to Penn State, but now it's those little things, the little details, just the fundamentals that are going to make him a great football player. And you can just see his development over the last, 2 months, 3 months since we've kind of been back, and how he's just every day just growing. Now he has his up and downs because he's young, but he has some really, really good days now. He just has to be more consistent. And that's where, I was the same way. A lot of young guys, the one thing, how consistent can they be? And it's about locking in every day. And he's growing every single day, which is great.
Anthony Wiggin is somebody who came in last year. The decision was made to redshirt him, so he still has a couple of years of eligibility remaining. So as he pushes forward, not just as a contributor, but what kind of foundation does he have?
He's powerful. Great leg drive, is learning how to be a technician as well. But, I can see him helping us this year and for sure years to come because of, what he has and the tools that he has. And if I can get him to perform at a high level, he'll be a very, very good guard, and he'll be a very good football player. And he's starting to see it, and he's starting to build more confidence in himself. And he's a guy that you'll definitely, be seeing.
Des Holmes is a guy that's seen some time at tackle and at guard. You've had a chance to work with him. When you've worked with him, what do you like?
Everything. He is loved. Always asking me questions. Always locked in. He's a guy that goes 100 miles per hour every play, and he can play both guard and tackle, which is great. And he's fighting to play a lot of ball, if not starting. So he's doing a heck of a job. He's a guy that you're going to see a lot on Saturday.
All right, a guy that maybe people don't know much about, but he can plug in a couple of spots, Bryce Effner. When you see him, look, he's still in the infancy of what he's trying to do, but what do you like?
Yeah, I like Bryce. He has good feet. He's a guy that can play both left and right tackle, and, I'm going to probably keep him there. I think he's athletic enough to play on the edge, and, he's a guy that, again, is a future for us, that, we might get in to, play if need be, but he's a guy that for sure you're going to see, as he develops, he's going to play a lot of football for us.
Phil, everyone talks about cohesion on the offensive line all the time. Is that something that can be developed in the preseason, or is it something you really have to see in a game?
I think it definitely can be in the preseason. Through live situations, through scrimmages. You don't really get to feel the realness of it until the game, but I think you can be very close and you can get your guys to, kind of bond and make sure they're communicating, make sure they're understanding if you really harp it. And you kind of, if you make, scout team, if you make that feel like the game, if you make live situations feel like the game, if you get as many game reps as possible, then you guys go out to the game and feel comfortable. And I think that's what Coach Franklin's really good at, being able to make sure that when we get to Saturday, we've already played the game. We already feel comfortable. We already have confidence of, what's going to happen. And he puts situations throughout the day and throughout practice that get us ready for the game. And, that's how, I feel that, Saturday we're going to go out and we're going to play very well.
So based on that answer, where do you feel you are on cohesion in this preseason based on the situations Coach Franklin has put them in?
I feel really good. I feel, we're ready to go. We still have to, still keep developing, keep getting better, keep working on our technique. But, we're getting closer and closer every day. And, I can't wait for the first game.
And finally, for you, obviously, it's not like, you don't have any Pennsylvania roots. You do. What does this mean for you to be now an offensive line coach at Penn State with the tradition it has, because you've been at other places that have great tradition as well?
Everything. That's why I came here. Being 2.5 hours away, growing up, being a Penn State fan, wishing, I know if you know the story, I wish I would have been able to come and play here.
I know.
But, coming to be able to coach and be a part of this program and being part of the culture and the success and keep it going. And, my goal, I won 2 national championships as a player, and I want to win one as a coach. So I'm going to give everything I got for that to happen, and I want to do it here.
Penn State is so fortunate to have you, and we're grateful that you took time to be with us this evening. Thank you so much, Phil, and best of luck as we get closer to the season here.
Thank you very much.
That's Phil Trautwein. Penn State will open with Indiana Saturday at Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. Kickoff set for 3:30. We're on beginning at 2 o'clock from Bloomington. We'll come back with more in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Whether you're cheering for LA or Tampa Bay in the World Series, you'll hit a home run with a new Kia from Sunbury Motors Kia.
Wanna see ya in a Kia. Sunbury Motors Kia.
You'll always be treated like a champion at SMC. Hurry in now and check out the 2020 Kia Fortes. Sunbury Motors Kia has them starting at $17,998. Under $20,000 for a brand new car. Sunbury Motors also has 24 2020 Kia Seltos available. You have to check out this hard-to-find, small-sized, all-wheel drive crossover. All prices are clearly marked with rebates and discounts. See the sticker and know the savings. Remember, every new Kia comes with a 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. Tampa Bay Rays, LA Dodgers, no matter who wins the national title, you'll be the big winner with a new Kia from Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummel's Wharf. Warranty is a limited powertrain warranty. For details, see dealer or go to kia.com.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And back here on the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Matt Catrillo here with you from the producer's chair. Steve is literally en route to Indy, and for tomorrow's game for Penn State at Indiana in Bloomington. So if you're just joining us today, Steve's going to join us during the 4 o'clock hour today while he is driving on I-65 from Chicago to Indianapolis. A couple flight issues kind of changed things around for Steve, so he is going to be joining us as he's driving during the 4 o'clock hour. We have Rich Scarcella still coming up at 4:06 today, and the King as well with our pick segment at 4:35. So, Steve, doing many different things just for you, the fan, as he gets set for Penn State at Indiana tomorrow, literally en route, in case you're joining us here. So Steve is coming up in the 4 o'clock hour live from his rent-a-car and driving to Indy from his flight to Chicago. Today's show brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. And Steve, of course, in the very mobile, actual mobile Sunbury Motors studio today from I-65, we assume, at that point. And, of course, every Friday show brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Water, soft drinks, snacks, domestics, microbrews, best selection of beer anywhere. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. The Pickle Bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills. Indeed, second to none. And also, the 6 different flavors of slushies good to go for this weekend, so make sure you get stocked up for the weekend. It's still warm out there, so you can still enjoy that nice, refreshing slushies from Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. So we just heard again from Phil Trautwein. We playing that interview that we heard from earlier this week from Steve. And before Steve left today for Indiana, he had a chance to talk with StateCollege.com's Ben Jones and kind of recapping what happened with Patrick Chambers and suddenly resigning yesterday, or actually it was right after the show on Wednesday. It was late Wednesday evening, and then we had a lot of reaction hearing yesterday from Nate Bauer, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Now we'll hear from Ben Jones, who was also on that call with Sandy Barber. We heard from her yesterday as well in her quick mention with the media on that Zoom conference. So, Steve, before he left to go for Indiana, had a chance to talk with Ben Jones, StateCollege.com, on what happened with Patrick Chambers, now no longer the head coach of Penn State men's basketball.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me.
All right. Obviously, the timing of it is to me, I'm sitting there, all of a sudden I get a text. I said, you have to be kidding me. Really? What was your thought when you found out?
Yeah, I think it was pretty much the same thing. I mean, I think we knew at least the one Rozier Bolton story, and you figure that, Penn State did, they did their due diligence. They talked around. You have those conversations with Pat about what is and isn't acceptable. Everyone kind of moves on. And, it reminds me a little bit, the timing's slightly different, but, Ed DeCellis left at sort of an opportune moment, not quite as bad as this. But, yeah, I was shocked. I figured that this was water under the bridge at that point. Honestly, I was on the phone with Pat 2 days ago talking about the upcoming season, and certainly, it's not that he was going to tell me that anything was going on, but you didn't get the sense that anything was going on talking to him for a while there. So, I was as shocked as anyone, and it's going to be interesting to see how the next couple of weeks unfold. Yeah,
it's going to be. Obviously, in going through this, he coached the team in practice on Tuesday. My understanding is I don't think they practiced yesterday. I think he told them there was no practice. But now Jim Ferry has to take over, and Jim's. Look, it's not like Jim hasn't been around the block. He's taken teams to the NCAA tournament before. What's your thought on that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally, this is sort of the perfect answer to that question, which is what do you do so late in the cycle? Because it's not as though you're going to go hire a coach away from somewhere else, especially not, with Penn State. Jim was a guy that they brought in to really kind of not revamp the offense, but give it a little kickstart. I think they've done, obviously, I think the last few years have kind of been self-explanatory in terms of the points Penn State's been able to score against some good teams. He already knows the players. It's good for continuity. It's good for maybe getting guys to stick around if they're starting to have thoughts elsewhere. And honestly, depending on the situation, nobody knows what the hiring pool is going to look like. Nobody knows what the financials are going to look like in a year. But if you're talking about a guy that might be at least a short-term solution, I think you could do a lot worse than Jim Perry.
How much does this put on the leadership of John Harrah, Jamari Wheeler, Miles Dredd, Myron Jones? What does this put on their shoulders now to get the program, to keep the rudder, putting the program in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think that, the situation is obviously different, but it reminds me a little bit of how Bill O'Brien talked about how important, Michael Zordich was, how important Michael Motti was. These guys that really, at the end of the day, your players are your program, and the people that you have in that program are important, but ultimately you have to have your players all on the same page. You have to have your leaders pulling, as James Franklin has said, although he hasn't said it in a while, getting everyone to pull the rope in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge, because if you lose your players, even if you like your coaches and your assistants, if they their heart's just not in this thing, and frankly, it would be fair for them to feel that way right now. You're in for a long haul, both in the short term and the long term. So I think, it's huge to get those guys on the same page. But I think the good thing is, at the end of the day, these guys they're playing for each other, and I think that's not going to change regardless of who the coach is. Jamari Wheeler is going to be Jamari.
Mm-hmm.
Myron Jones, John Harrah, those guys are all going to be those guys for each other. And ultimately, you like to think that that's enough to get you through a season.
How would you characterize Pat Chambers' tenure as the head basketball coach?
I mean, at the end of the day, you look at where they started and you look where they finished, and you know as well as anyone the improvements that happened inside the Bryce Jordan Center, around it, in the community, the quality of recruiting out of Philadelphia. It's hard to say that they did anything but get better over the course of what amounts to 10 years. You can nitpick with anyone. You can say X, Y, or Z about anyone in terms of coaching or in terms of how X, Y, or Z game goes, but that's true for any coach, especially one that sticks around for a long time. But, I think at the end of the day, Penn State got a bargain for the money they were paying him, and ultimately, you can quibble here or there, but I think, it's hard to argue that Penn State did anything but become an immensely better program under his watch.
So you're a Penn State basketball player on this day. You're sitting there, and the guy that was your head coach on Tuesday isn't there. You don't have a schedule, and this is nobody's fault, by the way. It's just, you're waiting for the Big Ten, everybody else. You don't have a schedule. You think you're playing November 25th or whatever. And you're not going to have any fans in the Jordan Center because of all these circumstances. It is a crazy time to be a student athlete.
Yeah, it is tough, and especially, you mentioned the lack of the schedule, and you're right, that's not, strictly speaking, Penn State's fault. Everyone's sort of waiting for that.
That's
but,
right.
I do think it's tough. I mean, when it's all said and done, guys talk about, they're playing for the school and they're playing for, all these different things. But really, these guys are trying to get some basketball on film, because they are all, by the time you get to Penn State, by the time you're playing in the Big Ten, you're thinking about what happens after that. Not everyone, but, a lot of these guys are. So, I think there's still excitement, there's still enthusiasm, but, it's going to be tough. I heard from a couple guys, not players, but, people around the program last night, and it's just a real gut punch. And, the other side of that coin is, obviously we don't know everything that's happened, and I don't want to, assume that this shouldn't have happened or that I know everything that did happen. But certainly when it comes to the players and the staff members that, were not, directly a part of all of this, you go, that's tough for them. It leads to an uncertain future, and, you hope for their sake that, they can kind of get back on their horse and figure out whatever is next, because certainly there's not a lot of time between now and whenever that first game officially happens.
It's amazing how young people rally. I mean, that's something. It's amazing how young people rally. One thing that, again, we don't know what's in the internal investigation. Obviously, it was enough for them to say, I think we need to do this. And so they did. And Pat opted to resign. Sandy Barber has not been one. She has always been one that has allowed coaches to have a lot. She gives them time. So obviously this isn't something like on October 21st sit down and say, well, I'm going to do it. That's not who she is. This obviously had to be a very tough thing for her to do too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, she had put a lot of stock into Pat over the years.
Mm-hmm.
She had given him a lot of time and a lot of support. And I think, you can say whatever you want about how much money Penn State has spent on Penn State basketball over the course of the last over the last decade. But when it's all said and done, for the most part, she supported the things they wanted to do to the best of her ability. So I don't doubt that this wasn't easy. I imagine we will never fully know. You and I might hear, a few things here or there, but,
Right.
I don't imagine it'll ever be public knowledge. I don't know if that's good or bad. But certainly, I don't think that, you make a decision like this, a snap judgment, you don't do it with any sort of enjoyment. And certainly she kind of reflected that in her brief press availability yesterday. So it is certainly not an easy time for anyone. And
No.
I imagine that they're not having any more fun today than they did yesterday.
No, this had to be very tough for her to do as well, and that can't be left out of the equation. How, we don't know. When I start looking at a schedule, part of what I do when looking at a schedule is, who do you play twice? How good are the teams you play twice? Who do you play once? Where do you play them? I mean, those are usually things I look at when I'm thinking about what a team can do during the course of the season. So without the advantage of what I just talked about, because we don't know any of that right now, how good can this team actually be?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting because really the question, I think they can play fine without Lamar. I think they've got plenty of guards. I think you figure that those guys are going to get older, each and every year. They have so many of them. I think the real question is, what kind of John Harrah are you going to get? How is Abdu going to do behind him?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the question for me. A little bit like football, how are the receivers going to go? You look at basketball and you go, how are the big men going to do? And I think we've seen John. You saw in that NIT run, he was fantastic and arguably to a certain extent better than Mike had been that year. He doesn't have Mike's athleticism necessarily, but he's the guy that's going to get you rebounds. I imagine Penn State in a world where none of yesterday happened was going to look a little bit more like the DJ Newbill era kind of team where there's a lot more guard-oriented, a lot more outside sort of stuff. And I think they've got the personnel to do that. Certainly MJ has been a guy that's made a lot of shots. Seth Lundy was coming on at the end of the year. And I think the big advantage for them is they have a lot of returning experience, which means you're not going to have to throw these freshmen into the fire right away. You can kind of ease them in, and I think Seth Lundy's kind of a good example of that, a guy that didn't have a lot of minutes early in the year. And then by the end of the season, I think he started a couple games when Myron Jones was out. There's a lot of opportunities for these guys to get better. So how good can they be? Like you said, we don't know a lot of the variables. But really, to me, it comes down to if John Harrah plays consistently, he doesn't have to be Mike Watkins. He just has to be John Harrah. They've got all the pieces to be just as competitive as they were last year. But, so many things are odd this year. So many factors are different. Your guess is as good as mine as how it actually ends up.
Well, Ben, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it very much.
Yep, I'll see you this weekend from a distance.
And that is Ben Jones, StateCollege.com, having a chance to talk with Steve Jones before Steve began his trip out to Indiana for Penn State in Indiana tomorrow at 3:30 here on WKOK. If you're just joining us, Steve's had a little bit of some flight issues, so he's going to be joining us, though, in the next hour to join us live from his rent-a-car as he will be en route from Chicago when he had to fly out to Chicago instead after a couple of flight changes due to fog. Now he's going to drive from Chicago to Indianapolis where he's staying for the game tomorrow. So that is where the situation here with the Sunbury Motor Studio, literally mobile today, as Steve will get set to join us in the next half hour, which will be joined by Rich Scarcella from the Reading Eagle for his take on the Indiana game. And then we're going to hear from, of course, the King with our picks for this week. It was not a good week for either one of us last week. So KJ and Steve took some big hits, but I still got the lead, so we'll go over that in a little bit. And, of course, we will be picking the big one between the two undefeated teams in the AFC, Pittsburgh, and the Tennessee Titans, so stay tuned for that. It is the Steve Jones Show coming up after this as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors and Brewers Outlet.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you and thank you for your years of patronage.